The chemo chair was cold. Always was. Vinyl padding, thin blanket, the rhythmic hiss of the IV pump beside me. It was my third treatment, week 4 of a 12-week cycle. I'd just settled in, headphones on, staring at the same neutral-colored wall, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, then thought better of it, and swiped to listen. The voicemail was less than 30 seconds long. "Hi, this is Carl. I wanted to catch you before the weekend. After careful consideration, we've decided to terminate your employment, effective immediately. Your condition is affecting morally. We have to let you go. HR will follow up with the exit paperwork. Please don't return to the office. Thanks." That was it. No mention of the 8 years I'd worked there. No acknowledgement of the medical leave request I'd submitted 2 weeks prior. Just a voicemail from a blocked number. While I sat with poison running through my veins, trying to survive long enough to keep paying rent. The nurse walked by and asked if I needed anything. I shook my head, said I was fine. My voice sounded normal. That surprised me. I put the phone down, leaned back, and watched the IV bag slowly empty itself into my arm. There was no outburst, no tears, just the silence that comes when someone takes something from you you'd already started to expect would be taken. Carl hadn't looked me in the eye in weeks. Ever since I started working from home more often, ever since I showed up to the office wearing a knit cap and looking pale, I opened my email. Nothing from HR, nothing official, just the echo of that one line still playing in my head like static. "Your condition is affecting morale. We have to let you go." I closed my eyes, not because I was tired, but because it felt safer than looking at anything. I thought about the project still on my desk, the last team call where no one said a word to me. I thought about the way people stop seeing you when you look sick. And I thought, I should have seen this coming. 6 months earlier, I'd sat in a doctor's office while the words "Stage 2" and "treatment plan" circled the room like flies. I'd come in for fatigue and mild chest pain, left with a folder of pamphlets and an appointment for a biopsy. 2 weeks later, I was a cancer patient. I remember walking out to my car and sitting there for 10 minutes without starting the engine. Everything felt the same. Steering wheel, radio dial, old coffee cup in the holder, but I wasn't the same anymore. Something had shifted, quietly, like a floorboard giving under weight you didn't know was there. The first person I told was my sister, then my landlord, then HR. I scheduled a Zoom meeting with Carl that Friday. I didn't want to do it over video, but I also didn't want to walk into the office and see the look on his face in person. "I wanted to let you know what's going on," I said, voice steady. "I've been diagnosed with stage 2 cancer. I'll be starting treatment next month. But I want to stay on as long as I'm able. I'll work remote as much as I need to, but I'm not stepping away unless it becomes absolutely necessary." Carl blinked a few times. "Okay," he said slowly. "Thanks for being upfront." That was it. HR was a little better. They scheduled a call, sent me the FMLA paperwork, and used words like flexibility and accommodations. The woman I spoke with, Janelle, even said she admired my determination. "I know this must be a lot," she said. "Just let us know what you need." I thought, maybe it'll be okay. I told my team lead next. He nodded, said sorry to hear it, then launched into a status update on the client rollout. No follow-up. No. "How are you feeling?" I went back to work the next day. Same desk, same Slack threads, same Carl. But I noticed the tone shift immediately. Less eye contact, fewer emails, my name disappearing from meeting invites. By the time I had my first chemo session, no one was checking in at all. And maybe that silence told me everything I needed to know. The change wasn't instant, just gradual enough that I could almost pretend it wasn't happening. At first, it was little things. A weekly project sync that used to be on my calendar just wasn't. I messaged Carol, the project manager, and she apologized. "Oh, sorry, must have been an oversight. We'll loop you in next week." But next week came and went. Then there were the emails. fewer CCs. Threads I should have been copied on client approvals, dev changes started happening without me. When I followed up, I'd get the same bland replies. Already handled. We've moved in another direction. Carl stopped saying good morning when we passed in the hallway. I noticed how my coworkers' conversations would pause when I entered a room. Not hostile, exactly just awkward. Like they didn't know what to say to someone whose eyebrows were falling out. I still wore a hat indoors most days. Still smiled. Still hit my deadlines. But none of that mattered. One Friday, I logged in to find my access to a key client folder revoked. I pinged IT. Must be a glitch. Then pinged Carl. He never responded. The week after that, I joined a standing Monday call only to find the Zoom room empty. I messaged around. Turns out the meeting had been moved to a new time. Everyone had been told. I hadn't. The moment that really hit was when a new client project launched the kind I usually lead and. It was handed to Kyle, a junior I had trained last year. He didn't even know how to run half the back-end tools, but Carl said it was a good growth opportunity for him. I sat there staring at the email. No feedback, no conversation, just quietly cut out. That was when I realized I wasn't just being left behind. I was being erased. I started saving everything: calendar invites, Slack logs, changes in project assignments. I downloaded copies of my past performance reviews. I documented every meeting I was excluded from. Not because I wanted to go to war, but because I could feel one coming. Chemo takes things from you slowly. First, your energy, then your appetite, then your sleep. There's a moment, somewhere between round 3 and 4, when your body starts to feel foreign. Like you're just borrowing it, hoping it holds together for another week. I worked through all of it. Woke up nauseous, sat through client calls with a trash bin next to my chair just in case. Took a laptop to infusion appointments. Typed briefs while the IV pump ticked beside me. I didn't miss deadlines. I didn't ask for special treatment. I just worked. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear. Maybe I needed something I could still control. I told myself, if I just stayed useful, they'd have no excuse to push me aside. If I just kept producing, I'd be harder to disappear. But cancer doesn't respect deadlines. Some days, I had to close my eyes between paragraphs, just to stay upright. Some nights I'd wake up at 3 a.m., with bone pain so sharp I'd bite down on a towel. Still, I showed up. I kept a folder on my desktop labeled redundancies. It wasn't for client files. It was for proof. Screenshots of meetings that moved without notice. Emails that should have included me. Comments from Carl I couldn't quite prove were discriminatory, but still saved, just in case. I also kept notes from every HR conversation. Dates, times, who said what. I wasn't looking for a fight, but I'd seen enough in the past month to know where this was going. And if they were going to pretend I wasn't there, I needed a record that I was. One afternoon, after vomiting through lunch, I finished a 14-page campaign strategy and turned it in ahead of deadline. Carl replied with a single line. Thanks. I'll have Kyle give it a once-over. Kyle, who'd been in the role for 5 months, who was half my age and didn't know the difference between CTR and CPA. Kyle, who looked like he slept 8 hours and had no idea what it was like to walk through hell just to keep a job that didn't want you anymore. That night, I opened my journal, wrote one sentence. If they won't fight for me, I'll fight for myself. It happened during the Wednesday stand-up. 15 people on a Zoom call, everyone half listening while Carl ran through weekly updates in his usual clipped tone. I kept my camera off, hadn't felt well that morning, and the light made the nausea worse. Still, I was there, taking notes, tracking action items, doing the job. Carl was wrapping up when he said it. We'll keep pushing through this next quarter, and hopefully things settle down a bit. Could really use some good energy around here. There was a pause. Then he added, with a little laugh, No offense to our resident cancer warrior. But man, the whole terminal vibe isn't exactly boosting morale. Muted laughter. A few awkward chuckles. One person turned their camera off mid-smile. No one said anything else. I sat at my desk, the heat rising behind my ears. It was framed as a joke, a throwaway line. I wasn't even addressed by name, but everyone knew who he meant. I muted the call, turned my camera on, and stared at my own face on the screen. Pale, hollow-eyed, hat pulled low. I looked like someone who was surviving. And apparently that was too much for Carl. Bad for morale. That's what he thought of me. Not the person who'd trained 3 of his new hires. Not the one who'd stayed late for 3 years to clean up after failed pitches. Not the employee who worked through chemo without missing a deadline. Just a vibe killer. Just a reminder of something fragile he didn't want to deal with. When the meeting ended, I didn't say anything. Didn't call him out. Just logged the time and date in my notes. Wrote the quote down word for word. I knew better than to react in the moment. But I also knew something had crossed a line. This wasn't about being overlooked anymore. This was about being targeted. And the worst part was, I could still hear that laugh-a-san the way no one had spoken up after. The chemo room was quieter than usual. 2 other patients reading silently. A nurse adjusting someone's IV. My chair squeaked when I shifted. I had a knit blanket over my knees. Earbuds in but no music playing. I opened the voicemail again. Listened for the 3rd time. Hi, this is Carl. I wanted to catch you before the weekend. After careful consideration, we've decided to terminate your employment, effective immediately. Your condition is affecting morale. We have to let you go. HR will follow up with the exit paperwork. Please don't return to the office. Thanks. I hit replay. Same clipped tone. Like he was reading from a script. Not even a trace of discomfort. Just clean execution. Get it done. Remove the liability. Reset the team energy. We have to let you go. I looked down at the slow drip of chemicals feeding into my vein. Taxotere this round. Metallic taste already crawling up the back of my throat. The nurse walked by, glanced down at me. You okay? I nodded once. Yeah. Just a rough morning. She didn't press. She'd seen worse. Probably knew when someone wasn't telling the full truth. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. Carl hadn't waited for my next medical update. He hadn't scheduled a meeting or asked how I was managing. He'd waited until a Friday afternoon, knew I'd be unreachable. Knew I wouldn't make a scene. Left a voicemail. Made it HR's problem. Please do not return to the office. As if I'd been planning to drop by in the middle of treatment. As if I hadn't already become invisible to them weeks ago. I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed a new line. Voicemail saved. Transcribe it later. Then under it. Condition. Morale risk. Direct quote. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just clean. Cold. Like I'd been stripped down to just the essential parts. Carl had made his move. And now I knew exactly what kind of game I was in. I didn't cry in the chemo chair. Didn't cry in the car. But when I got home, I dropped my bag in the entryway and sat down on the floor coat still on, keys still in hand and just unraveled. It wasn't loud. No wailing. No fists slamming the wall. Just that kind of grief that comes in waves, crashing slow and full in your chest until breathing feels optional. My partner, Eli, came in from the kitchen a few minutes later. Saw me sitting there with the same blank look I'd given the nurse earlier. He didn't ask what happened. Just sat next to me. Put his arm around my shoulder. Let the silence stay a while. Eventually, I told him. The voicemail. The line about affecting morale. The unreturned emails. The meetings I'd been cut out of. The projects reassigned behind my back. I said it all like I was reading from a checklist. Eli didn't interrupt. When I finished, he exhaled once, quietly. You're not crazy, he said. And you're not imagining this. They're trying to erase you. I nodded. My hands had stopped shaking. That's when it started to shift something behind my eyes, tightening. The sadness didn't leave, but it made room for something else, something sharper. I stood up, walked to the dining table, opened my laptop. "Where are you going?" Eli asked. "Work," I said. "My kind of work now." I started pulling up emails, Slack messages, calendar invites. I organized everything by date, by incident. I found screenshots I'd saved. I exported performance reviews. I created folders. Comments, exclusions, access changes, voicemail transcript. It was past midnight when I stopped. I looked at the screen, a tree of digital breadcrumbs staring back at me. They thought I'd go quietly, but I'd already survived worse than them. I found her through a friend of a friend, Maya Reyes, employment attorney, 45, sharp eyes, sharper memory, former litigator turned workers' rights advocate. Her reviews were all the same. Calm, relentless, knows the law better than anyone. We met at a small cafe 2 blocks from my apartment. It was raining lightly. I arrived 5 minutes early. She was already there, black coffee in one hand, leather briefcase on the seat beside her. "You must be the one with the voicemail," she said by way of greeting. I nodded. I slid a flash drive across the table. "That has everything. Emails, access logs, the voicemail." I transcribed it. "There's also HR documentation and some Slack messages I saved." Maya plugged it into her laptop, brows furrowing as she scrolled. 5 minutes passed in silence. Then she closed it and looked at me directly. "This isn't just wrongful termination," she said. "It's retaliation, and it's illegal." She leaned back in her chair. "They didn't fire you because you couldn't do the job. They fired you because you made them uncomfortable. And they tried to make you disappear before anyone noticed." "Can I fight this?" I asked, voice quieter than I intended. She nodded. "Yes, but not by playing nice. You've got documentation, a pattern, and a time-stamped voicemail, with language no lawyer in the world could defend. They gave us everything we need." Her voice was calm, measured, like she'd been here before, seen how these stories played out. And I realized she was angry, not loud, not dramatic, but burning, in the way only someone truly fed up with injustice can be. She reached into her case and pulled out a blank intake form. "We're going to start with the EEOC. Then if they're smart, your company settles before this ever sees court. If not," she smiled slightly, "we'll make sure they regret underestimating you." I exhaled. For the first time in weeks, it felt like the air actually went somewhere. Carl had left a voicemail. I had a lawyer. Game on. The deeper I dug, the more careful I had to be. My access hadn't been fully revoked. Someone in IT must have forgotten to disable admin-level permissions. I didn't ask questions. Just used what I had while it lasted. Late one night, I logged into our performance management system. My last formal review, originally rated exceeds expectations, was now listed as meets minimum standards. The attached comments had changed. Phrases like strong communicator and reliable under pressure had been replaced with inconsistent attendance and shows signs of disengagement. I scrolled further. The date of the edit wasn't even subtle. 2 days after I informed Carl about my diagnosis. I screenshotted everything. Next, I checked my HR file. It looked thinner. Emails I knew existed weren't there. My approved remote work agreement? Gone. The notes from my call with Janella, the HR rep, who said she'd support my leave accommodations, had been replaced with a single line. Employee declined formal leave, requested to continue working, which was a lie. Then came the message. Sarah, from compliance. We'd worked together on a few big projects. She was sharp, kept to herself, and owed me nothing. But she sent me a DM. Check your personal email. Delete this afterward. I did. Inside was a forwarded memo from a leadership Slack channel I didn't have access to anymore. Topic: Managing team culture during extended absences. One line stood out. X's condition is creating unease among staff. We must consider team stability as a long-term priority. They didn't even use my name, just the variable, like I was a problem to be solved. I stared at the sentence for a long time. I wasn't an employee anymore. I was a liability they wanted erased. Good. Now I had proof. Maya didn't flinch when I showed her the memo. She read it twice, nodded once, and said, "That's the nail." The next morning, she filed the paperwork with the EEOC. The formal charge listed retaliation, discrimination based on medical condition, and wrongful termination under FMLA and ADA protections. She also began preparing a civil suit. "We'll serve them both," she said. "Let them choose which courtroom they'd prefer to lose in." Within 48 hours, my former employer was notified. Carl didn't respond. Not a word. No email. No call. Nothing. HR, on the other hand, found their voice very quickly. Janelle, suddenly back in the picture, and a carefully worded message expressing surprise and concern over the complaint. She offered to clarify any misunderstandings and discuss a resolution. I didn't reply. Maya did. Her email was short. "Please direct all communication through my office moving forward. My client will not be responding directly." That same day, I received a calendar invite from a legal liaison at the company. Subject: voluntary mediation discussion. I declined. That weekend, Sarah texted me again. "They're scrubbing internal systems, redacting old files. Be careful." I wasn't worried. By now, everything worth saving lived on a hard drive in my closet, in a folder called Morale. Let them scrub. I had the truth. And now, they had a legal clock ticking in the background of every meeting they held. It started with a text. "You didn't hear this from me, but can I tell this anonymously?" It was Lena, a former colleague turned local reporter. We'd stayed in loose touch over the year's holiday greetings, the occasional like on LinkedIn, but she'd heard the story from someone else. Probably Sarah. Probably off the record. We met in a coffee shop 2 neighborhoods over. She ordered tea. I ordered nothing. Just sat across from her, arms folded. "I won't name you," she said, "unless you give me permission. But this story, this isn't just HR mishandling. This is the kind of thing that makes people furious. Rightfully." I hesitated. Part of me still didn't want to be seen. Still felt fragile, like if too many eyes landed on me, I might crack. But another part, stronger now, knew what silence had cost me. "Tell it," I said. "Anonymously. For now." The article dropped 3 days later. Cancer patient fired over morale concerns. Company remains silent. It didn't mention my name, but it included the quote from Carl's voicemail, the memo line, the pattern of exclusion, and it included Maya's confirmation of an ongoing EEOC case. The story hit harder than I expected. Within hours, it was trending locally, then nationally. People weren't just angry, they were gutted. Comments poured in from cancer survivors, caregivers, HR professionals, lawyers. "This happened to me. This is why people don't tell their employers. Fire that manager and compensate the hell out of the employee." I turned off my notifications by noon. By evening, Maya called. "Your company's about to panic," she said. "Do not talk to anyone without me." She didn't sound concerned. She sounded ready. So was I. The company responded 2 days later. A generic statement, posted on their website, and sent to every major outlet. "We are committed to fostering an inclusive and supportive work environment for all employees. We take these allegations seriously and are conducting an internal review." No names, no apology, just boilerplate damage control. But the leaks had already started. Sarah sent me another message. "Internal memo says not to comment. Leadership scrambling. Carl's on leave." And then came the stories. Former employee, some I barely remembered. Others I'd trained myself, started posting online. One described being pushed out after revealing a disability. Another, a single mom, had been written up repeatedly after requesting reduced hours to care for her son. It turned out I wasn't the first, just the one who fought back. And now, that the story was public, others were finding the courage to speak. Maya started compiling testimonies. The EEOC updated our case status to pattern of discriminatory practice. Behind the scenes, the machine was breaking. Carl had vanished from LinkedIn. The company's Glassdoor rating had tanked to 1.9 overnight. And every time they tried to explain it away, someone new came forward with a contradiction. Let them talk. Let them spin. The truth had already left the building. The conference room was quiet. No jury box, no wood-paneled drama, just a long table, 2 attorneys from corporate, a company rep from HR, Maya, and me. Carl sat at the end, posture stiff, eyes tired. He didn't look like someone ready for a fight. I didn't look like someone who'd been through chemo. Maya opened, calm, direct. She outlined the retaliation timeline, my diagnosis, the voicemails, the internal memo, the rewritten performance reviews. She referred to each exhibit by number. No drama, just documentation. Carl shifted in his seat. When it was his turn to speak, he cleared his throat and looked down at the papers in front of him. I want to be clear, he said. This wasn't personal. We were navigating a sensitive team environment. There were morale issues, productivity concerns. He trailed off. Maya nodded. Would you mind reading Exhibit D aloud? The voicemail transcript. Carl hesitated. HR's attorney jumped in. We don't believe that's necessary. Maya didn't flinch. It's already in the record. But sure, we can let it speak for itself. I sat back and watched them squirm. When my turn came, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a speech. I just handed over a flash drive. On here, I said, is the full chain of emails, calendar changes, performance file edits, and Slack messages, all time-stamped, all prior to my termination, including the memo referencing me as a condition that created unease. No one spoke. I looked at Carl. He looked at the table. For once, I let the silence work in my favor. Let them feel what it's like to be on the other end of nothing. The settlement came 2 weeks later. 7 figures. No NDA. Full acknowledgement of wrongful termination, retaliation, and FMLA violation. They didn't ask for a counteroffer, just wanted it over. Carl resigned the same day the paperwork was signed. Official statement said he was leaving to pursue new opportunities in leadership. Last I heard, he was freelancing as a consultant. Companies Googled his name now before returning his calls. The company released a second public statement. We recognize the need for structural change. Effective immediately, we are revising internal HR protocols, implementing mandatory bias training, and reevaluating all leave and accommodation procedures. Too little, too late, but still something. Their head of HR quietly retired. Sarah got promoted. And I got a check, an apology from a lawyer, and a letter from Maya that ended with, "You didn't just win a case, you exposed a culture." The money helped. The vindication helped more. But what mattered most was something smaller, quieter. The next time I sat in a chemo chair, the nurse walked by, looked down, and smiled. "Good to see you back," she said. And this time, I smiled back. My final chemo appointment was on a Tuesday. No bell to ring, no crowd. Just me, the nurse, and a quiet room I knew better than I ever wanted to. The nurse smiled as she removed the IV line. "That's the last one," she said. "Labs look good. We'll schedule scans, but this part's over." I nodded. Didn't cry. Didn't cheer. Just breathed. And for the first time in a long while, the air felt clean. Outside, the sky was gray, but clear. I walked 3 blocks to a small park near the clinic. Same one I'd passed every week. Always meant to stop. Never had. I sat on a bench under a tree just starting to bud. That's when I opened the envelope. No return address. Just my name in handwriting I vaguely recognized. Inside was a letter from Lisa, one of the account managers I used to work with. She hadn't spoken up during everything. Not when Carl started cutting me out. Not during the hearing. Not even after the story broke. It read, "I've been carrying guilt for months. I knew what was happening. I saw the emails, the memo. I didn't say anything. I told myself it wasn't my business, that HR would handle it. But it was cowardice. Plain and simple. I'm sorry. What you did standing up, documenting everything it mattered. You made it harder for them to do this to someone else. I hope you're okay. And I hope, someday, you forgive the rest of us who stayed quiet when we should have spoken." I folded the letter and sat with it in my lap. I didn't feel angry. Just tired. But also a little lighter. Later that week, I emailed Maya. Asked her to connect me with an advocacy group she mentioned, One Son, that helps chronically ill workers navigate discrimination. I didn't want to sue anyone else. I just wanted to make sure no one else had to sit through chemo listening to a voicemail like mine. So, I started writing. Not revenge stories, just real ones. About what happened. About what silence costs. About how dignity isn't granted by a title or a policy, but reclaimed in quiet rooms, one decision at a time. And as I wrote the final paragraph of my first piece, I paused, then typed the closing line. Turns out, being bad for morale was exactly what they needed. This story was brutal. But this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.